All right. Good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to the second day of STEM Careers Week, where we're going to be focusing on STEM graduate school. My name is AJ Ehrenstein. I'm one of the two deans in charge of Beyond Barnard. And for those of you who don't know, we're the integrated hub for all things having to do with careers, graduate school, professional school, fellowships, student jobs, internships, and a lot of other stuff in between. Today's event is one in a very long series of events that are part of Summer Colloquium, which is an integrated effort to make sure that students and alumni, and all alumni of Barnard have access to Beyond Barnard, have access to resources that will keep you engaged with each other, building professional skills, learning important things on your career path this summer. So I want to dive in as quickly as possible. We'll go for about 60 minutes. And again, today's conversation is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube page, which I will follow up with the link as always. So today we're talking about STEM graduate school, navigating options and reflecting on possibilities. As I mentioned, this event is the latest in our Beyond Barnard Summer Colloquium series. I got to give a shout out to my colleague, Eric Wong, who not only makes sure that all of the crazy videos that we put together over the course of these 70 events are uploaded and shared, but also put together the cool vintage summer vibes in our look and feel for this great series this summer. So thanks to Eric. You can check out all of the events that are happening as part of Colloquium at the link that's there. I will also share it after the event to all of you who have checked in. Check it out. The participation has been fantastic so far. If you have ideas for other events that you want to see, particularly around STEM, but really around any topic that you think would be helpful for you and your colleagues, give us a shout. We love putting on things that are useful to students and alumni. To recap where we've been this week and where we're going. So yesterday, we had a great conversation that was essentially a broad-based introduction to STEM careers, focusing mainly through the lens of job documents. So thinking about how to translate your skills and experience through the lens of resumes, CVs, cover letters, and then some networking tips, how to structure the way that you present your STEM experience to the world for any range of opportunities. Today, we're going to talk about graduate programs, and I'm going to focus primarily on master's and PhD programs in STEM fields. However, don't run away too quick. I'm going to also try to say a few things about professional schools and other of the alphabet soup of degree types that you might be interested in pursuing as a STEM student at Barnard College or as an alum from a STEM field. Tomorrow, we'll be convening a conversation about technical interviews. I just got off with the lovely folks at Twitter, our dear friends there, who will be joining us tomorrow for an off-the-record conversation. So you heard it here first. We won't be recording tomorrow's conversation. Instead, we're hoping to get some kind of off-the-record advice from our friends at Twitter about the shape of technical interviews, about how to prepare for them, and about how to make the most of the opportunity to present your skills and experience in that format. Also tomorrow, there's a special School of Engineering and Applied Sciences 4+1 Pathways information session. You can sign up in Handshake if you're not already. Thursday, we have a fabulous alumni panel featuring alumni in a range of STEM careers and STEM roles. And we'll round out the week with a faculty discussion about graduate school careers, research, lots of different topics that are on everybody's mind. I'm not going to go through all of these learning goals again. As I mentioned yesterday, by the end of the week, if you've gone to at least a couple of these programs, you should be able to do some of these things, research careers with more context and some reflective structure about how to think about your fitness to a range of career opportunities. And that's in yesterday's conversation. The YouTube will be up by next week. Similarly, producing documents that can advance your objectives is a goal that we checked off a little bit yesterday. Tomorrow, we'll talk about preparing for technical interviews with more confidence. Today, we're going to focus on narrowing the list of graduate programs in which you might be interested as a STEM student or alum. We want to empower you to connect with alumni with more purpose, talk to faculty, and as always, have just a tiny bit of fun. I'm sad that there are no massive thunderstorms today because that was fun for me yesterday, but we'll make do with the cloudy weather. So into today's topic, what can you expect from our conversation about graduate school? So I think by the end of our conversation today, I hope that you'll be able to start reflecting on the reasons why you want to go to graduate school. I want to say a few things specifically about the context in which we're in, this COVID context, this economic period of economic uncertainty when individuals often flee to graduate school as though to some sort of refuge in the storm. It's really important to have a clear sense of why you want to go to graduate school. Graduate students who are most successful tend to have a clear sense of why they're there, what they're trying to get out of their program, why they're passionate about studying a particular research topic or area, and what they're hoping to achieve in the long run, thanks to their experience in graduate school. So I hope that we give you some ideas about how to explore these questions about your own goals and aspirations with respect to graduate level research in STEM, or maybe as a STEM student outside of STEM fields. To help you do that, I'm going to go through some significant differences between colleges and graduate school programs, how you can explore them, how you need to explore them in different ways. I'll go through some key moments in graduate timelines so you can understand better how graduate programs are laid out. I'll give you some ideas about how to research institutions and faculty in an organized and methodical way. And by the end, you should maybe have a sense of how to create an action plan for the next 6 weeks, essentially the rest of the summer, as you head into the fall and think about the heart of the application cycle. I'm not saying you have to apply this fall. Hopefully you're in a reflective stage. If you are applying this fall, we'll talk about timelines that could be effective there. But if you have a longer term timeline, that's okay. You don't have to be ready to apply to graduate school to get something out of today's presentation, I hope. So the very first question I have is, what degrees are you thinking about? And I know what you are thinking. Oh my God, he's going to poll us, isn't he? And I am. I'm going to launch a poll, and I'm going to have you give me an answer to 2 questions. It should be popping up on your screen. If not, let me know. Essentially, the first question I'm interested in having an answer to is, what kinds of graduate school are you interested in pursuing? And you can select as many options as you like. The second is, how do you feel when you think about the possibility of going to graduate school? And again, I want you to select as many as apply. And that, the last thing I have here is, OMG, what the heck does this even mean, right? What does this alphabet soup of degree types actually mean for you? But actually, oh my heck is a great slogan. And as you know from yesterday, I love dog pictures. For those of you who need a boost this summer, this extremely stressful summer where we are constantly emphasizing the importance of self-care, make sure that you check out my favorite dog Twitter, Dog Rates, We Rate Dogs. Great pictures of dogs advancing social justice. They're doing a fabulous job this summer, featuring Black-owned businesses, featuring cute pets, featuring things that are on our minds and hopefully keeping us well and safe and sane. So I'm looking at this list right now, and it looks like we've got a great distribution of different kinds of programs that you all are interested in. I'm really excited to see that. And also a range of emotions associated with graduate school. Basically an equal combination of anxious and worried about standardized tests, but also excited. So I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share the results with you all. PhDs are the #1 area of interest for those of you on this particular call. And, I don't blame you. Anxiety ranks high in the number of, ranks highest in terms of the kinds of emotions associated with thinking about graduate school. So not only do I want you to check out We Rate Dogs as a means of limiting your anxiety, I hope just a little bit, but I hope that today's presentation, with respect to the way that it provides information and hopefully some clarity on how to move forward, we can reduce some of the anxiety that's related to this process. And I think it's important to reduce that anxiety because if you're thinking about graduate school, this is something that can be really exciting. An additional couple of years, an additional many years of study in areas that matter to you. It's important to think, in other words, that it's, well, I guess I should have planned my slides a little bit better. I guess I anticipated correctly, it seems, that you all would be anxious, and I understand that. But you shouldn't worry. It's not about the letters behind your name or the alphabet soup of programs that you're applying to. The first thing that you need to be thinking about is the question of why you want to pursue knowledge at the graduate level in the first place. In other words, don't think about the GRE, the GMAT, the MCAT, the PhD, the MFA, the JD, all of these letters, right? The first thing you need to think about when you're thinking about graduate school in STEM fields or graduate school in something that's not in a STEM field is why you want to pursue knowledge at the graduate level. So the rest of today's agenda really walks through some of these questions of reflecting on your intentions before we move to what programs look like, how you might decide about what program could be a good fit for you given what you're interested in, some ideas about how you apply to programs. And again, I'm going to focus mainly on master's and PhD, which seems like a pretty good fit. But like I said, I'm going to also say some things about professional schools. And keep in mind, we have other programming dedicated to business and law school and medical school this summer. And then we'll move on to questions and next steps with some ideas about how you can plan the next couple of weeks in your self-reflection. So let's start with reflecting on your intentions and why you're interested in pursuing graduate school. So our friendly robot, again, from yesterday. Let's reflect not on particular degree programs, but what you enjoy about STEM fields. So think about your STEM work, you puny humans, we puny humans, all of us. We went through this yesterday a little bit as well for those of you who are on the call, thinking about what activities you enjoy about your work. Is it about independent research? Is it your classes? Is it collaborations with faculty and peers across disciplines and institutions? Is it finding practical applications for STEM ideas and innovations? Is it using STEM tools or STEM communication to provide services to others, teaching, mentoring, connections with communities that are underrepresented in STEM fields? Do you find technical mastery something that you're passionate about? How about communication in general, talking about the value of science to wide audiences? Do you enjoy teaching and mentoring? And yesterday I thought it was great that a lot of you identified problem solving as something that you're really passionate about in STEM fields. Of course, graduate school doesn't matter in the long run because soon the robots will destroy us all. But for the meantime, most of you will make it to graduate school before the STEM apocalypse or before the robot apocalypse. So it's important to have these kind of self-reflective moments and also to hopefully rely on each other as a source of insight and conversation. Okay, so here is where I'm going to try to get super fancy on Zoom and try to send you all into some breakout rooms. I'm going to try to give you a second more to reflect. We're going to talk in smaller groups about what you are passionate about, what is interesting to you about STEM work. And we're going to try to then gesture towards how to translate that work into specifics about graduate programs. So bear with me, this is my first time here. I'm going to assign all of you to 5 different rooms. I'm going to assign you automatically and you'll head out into the breakout room. Now listen, I want one of you all to kind of, say, I will be the person who records some of our conversation. You're not surveilled, don't worry about it. And then when we come back all together as a group, I just would love to hear some of the thoughts that come out of this group, these small group sessions. So again, we're thinking about what we're passionate about with respect to STEM work and start to think about how you want to live those passions out at the graduate level. I'm going to create the breakout rooms. You'll get a minute warning when I close the breakout rooms and we'll come back together. Okay? So let's try it. And if it's not working, please hit me up in the chat. Hi, so I see you coming all back out of the rooms. We'll keep them open for a little while longer to make sure everybody can find their way back. How was that? Was that super weird? Anybody want to go off mute? I can stop sharing my screen for a second and just see all your faces. That's the first time I tried that. Did that work okay?
No, it was good.
Yeah?
Yep.
Great. So does anyone want to talk a little bit about the findings of the group? I know we had 5 total groups, so anybody from group 1, did you even know what group you were in? That's Alyssa, Batul, Eugenia, Leora, and Ria. Anybody want to go? Shout it out.
I mean, there were different ideas about why we would go to graduate school or what the whether or not we wanted to. Not everyone seems so clear on that yet.
Great. So what are some of the kind of areas of lack of clarity? I think that's really helpful. Like, what are some of the things that are preventing people from feeling like they're certain they want to go?
I was in the group, and I think I mentioned because there was a talk about like research being a huge motivation for wanting to do graduate school and enjoying research and the capacity that you can have from undergrad and how much that can increase in graduate school and the opportunities and having like ownership, more ownership of what you're doing in graduate school. I guess some setbacks that clarity was like, personally, I was thinking about like going to industry first and then going back to grad school versus going from undergrad directly to grad school, because personally I'm a computer science major, and I've heard like both sides, or some people are talking about getting industry experience and learning tech as it's evolving might be beneficial, but also there's also much to say about graduate level work and having a deeper understanding of like classroom computer science and what that's like. So like weighing the pros and cons of that.
Okay, so 2 great observations here. One is like research and the independence that comes at the graduate level. I think that's an important one to be thinking about, and about your own facility and excitement with respect to research. And another is like, what happens between undergrad and graduate school? Like, so students often talk to me about gap years. I like to say that there's no such thing as a gap year in your life. There's only your life. But like, how much time do you take? What do you do between undergraduate and graduate school to help advance some of your reflections if you're thinking about graduate school? I think that's really helpful. Anybody else want to add like some of the things that people mentioned they're passionate about with respect to STEM fields and thinking about pursuing at the graduate level? Feel free to go off mute. You're all off video, which is like super bizarre for me, but that's totally fine.
Hi, AJ. I'll share.
Hey.
It was kind of funny that a lot of people in the group I was in were interested in research and policy. A lot of people were interested in like hands-on research, but they also liked the idea of combining it with like public health and just some sort of policy measures.
I think that's so great. And, I know that the Master in Public Health at Mailman is one of the degree areas that has been really interesting to folks in the past couple of years that I've seen. I think this speaks to something that's very endemic at Barnard, which is you want to think about how your knowledge can have an impact in the world. So STEM research plus like policy impacts, or even like law. So I think a lot of STEM students kind of discount the ways in which STEM knowledge is valued within the legal field as a means of kind of making change in the world using your kind of scientific thinking background in areas of expertise. So I think that's a great step. Thank you for bringing that up. I think it's really common to see some of this interaction between wanting to dive into research, but also trying to think about how to make science matter in the world in terms of policy, law, et cetera. I'll take 1 or 2 more if anybody just kind of wants to shout out a cool thing that came out in their super fancy Zoom breakout room.
I can go.
Sure.
I think a lot of us were in different disciplines within STEM, but something that people said that we had a lot in common was the importance of collaboration and working in teams. and how that was one of the most exciting aspects about STEM for some of us.
That's great. I love that. I think that that's such an important skill when it comes to how STEM experience can have value both in the lab at the graduate level, but also out in the world. So STEM is kind of inherently collaborative. I always find that STEM disciplines are some of the most productive when it comes to collaborating across international teams. You have individuals, if you've worked in a big lab at Columbia, potentially, you might be collaborating with folks across the world. But bye, Ariel. But so STEM is inherently collaborative. It connects people across different disciplines. I think one of the things I want to talk about in the second half of the conversation when we dig into specific programs is, what are you interested in connecting with people across disciplines, or are you interested in really diving deeply into a discipline? And this is one of the substantive kind of issues that you need to think about when you're reflecting on STEM graduate school. So thank you for bearing with that experiment. I thought it went pretty well. Hopefully you got some insights from each other. Let's go back into the presentation and kind of dig into this question of how to take some of these things that you discussed and bring them into experience at the graduate level. So, forgot my funny, so what did you find out, mortals? I really find this robot to be evil for some reason. At least he totally looks friendly. I don't know. I think when it comes to translating what you just discussed into specific reflections about graduate school, you need to think about a matrix of opportunity costs. For those of you who have taken economics, you may already know that what an opportunity cost is the cost in terms of an opportunity that you have to pay in order to pursue a different opportunity. That's the best way that I can describe it, having taken only 2 economics classes in college. But I also started thinking about what are the ways that you can kind of taxonomize your considerations about what matters to you with respect to graduate school. I broke it down into these 8 areas. And in the next part of the presentation, I'll talk about both PhDs and master's programs in terms of these 8 areas. What are these areas? I think very simply, they're questions of time, how much time you want to spend in graduate school, how much time you want to spend in the workplace, potentially before or after school, how much time you want to spend preparing for graduate school. Second consideration is, of course, money, your treasure. And I think there are a lot of different ways that this plays out in terms of your graduate reflections. It's not just the cost of graduate school, potentially, depending on the programs. It could also be the funding that's available to you. The questions about your monetary resources can have something to do with your career, lifetime earnings, return on investment. It can feel icky to instrumentalize your intellectual interests in this way, and that's the farthest from the thing that I want to do. But I think it's important as consumers of education that you think about the role that money plays in determining your options so that you can plan accordingly. The next one, Professor Fink, one of my favorite scientist characters from The Simpsons, access to faculty and research. What kind of work will you be doing, and who will you be doing it with? Who are the kinds of people you want to be conducting research with or learning from, and who are those that you want to move away from after you're done with your undergraduate experience? What disciplines do you want to focus in, and which do you want to pivot from? This next one is about careers. How does graduate school prepare you for specific careers, either within STEM, or how does it prepare you to move outside of STEM fields in your next career move? An important one for Barnard students is geography. It seems that everyone wants to stay in New York after you've spent time here. I can't believe that, having grown up here. Everybody when I grew up was trying to get away from this place, and now everyone wants to stay. But geographic considerations are important. Do you want to spend 6 years in a PhD program in a city? What if your strongest program is in the middle of a state that you're not really interested in going to? How do you make the decision about geography versus strength of program? The next, and I think is an important one, probably in terms of hierarchy, closer to the top of the list. How do you decide what type of research you want to do and how you want to present and bring that research out into the world? In other words, as a graduate student in STEM fields, does the program that you're pursuing privilege pure research that's presented in terms of academic conferences and publications? Does it privilege the production of research that is meant for public policy spheres or legal spheres, as we discussed? Are you interested in graduate school as a physician, or as a physician assistant, or as a nurse, where the research that you produce in the lab or in clinical settings is meant to make a difference in somebody's lives in terms of clinical practice? These are the kinds of questions you can deal with, reflect on when you think about the kinds of research you want to do and where that research goes, both in and after graduate school. The dancing bear, I love these Barnard GIFs, guys, or GIFs, whatever. I'm not quite on TikTok yet, if you can't tell, so my technical proficiencies are always uneven. But this Barnard emoji here is meant to reflect how can you think about connecting with the Barnard network to both understand what programs would be a good fit for you and how you might leverage the network after the program to make sure that you're finding a career that's a good fit for you. This last one, just the smiley face, I like to think about it as like a wild card. What are the other factors you might be considering when it comes to graduate school and what might make you happy? Like, happiness and graduate school are too often portrayed as diametrically opposed. I am a big believer, having gone to graduate school myself, though in English and not in like chemistry, that graduate school can be an immense source of happiness. You have the opportunity to pursue what you're interested in pursuing, what you're interested in thinking about for a finite period of time. So graduate school is not only a means to a career end, it is also an end in itself. It is itself a career move. And so thinking about what will make you happy in the context of graduate school is something that I think is important and is too much downplayed when we're thinking about graduate options, at least I've found. Or in other words, do as NASA's Katherine Johnson said. Katherine Johnson, a NASA mathematician and also winner of the 2018 Barnard Medal of Distinction, like what you do, and then you will do your best. I'm a big believer in basically anything that Katherine Johnson says, but that seemed particularly apt as she's standing against clouds that actually look like the clouds that I'm staring at right now. So what does some of these programs look like? And we're not going to go too much in depth, but I want to talk about the difference between the significant differences between masters in STEM and PhDs in STEM fields along those different inputs that I just explained. So master's degree in STEM fields will typically last you about 1 to 2 years. Most of your time will be spent in coursework. Many master's programs in STEM fields have a thesis project associated with them. Some programs, like those in computer science, engineering, in other fields, there might be a practicum associated with it, or a partnership or a project with some sort of research lab or employer that helps you develop the skills that you've built in the classroom in some sort of other environment. In terms of tuition, master's programs are typically higher. Many offer what's called merit aid, but what is essentially a discounted tuition cost. Right? So programs will be very competitive, and I think this is especially the case in STEM fields for great applicants, and may be willing to discount the kind of sticker price of tuition in order to attract candidates. We get questions constantly about scholarships and fellowships for master's level study, and typically they're not so readily available for most populations, for most disciplines as well. There may be some scholarships at the institution level, and we always suggest that students try to negotiate lower tuition costs once you get into programs. And it's something that Beyond Barnard is always happy to help with. I will say that, well, let me go back to here. Post-degree earnings can vary from master's program to master's program. And when you're thinking about a master's as a way to level up in your career, this may be an instance where you want to take time between undergraduate and graduate to have a real combination of professional experiences and a master's degree under your belt to leverage potential bigger increases in earnings. Again, this is only one consideration. Your primary consideration may always be your intellectual interest in the topic, but it can be the case that a master's candidate who comes directly out of undergrad may look very similar to an undergraduate candidate to a recruiter. I will say that one of the savviest things that I've seen students from Barnard do when they leave is to get employed at an institution of higher education before pursuing a master's degree there. Very often, one of the great benefits of working at a college or university is that you get tuition benefits, maybe 50% off of a degree program if you are an employee of the program, employee of the college or university, and then also enroll in a degree granting program there. In terms of how work is done at the master's level, I think it's important to always ask, what kind of access do you have to top faculty in a master's program? What's the relationship between students in the master's program and potentially students in a PhD program in the same department? Is there competition among master's students to get into the PhD program in that department? This can sometimes produce a culture that is too competitive and not collaborative in the ways that some of you highlighted you're interested in pursuing in STEM fields. So you want to understand what the relationship is between the master's students, the PhDs, and the faculty. You also want to really look at what the subfield experience is of the faculty in these programs, and might want to consider what kinds of technical expertise the faculty have if you're interested in developing technical skills in the course of a graduate program. Faculty at Barnard can be really helpful in thinking through the potential value of research that you conduct at the master's level. In terms of how people use the research, in terms of how it gets out into the world, I think that many times students will use master's programs as an opportunity to level up before a PhD. Maybe you want to use a master's program to bulk up your course load. That's the last bullet point on this list. Or raise your GPA at a graduate program so that you're more prepared to apply to PhD programs afterwards. Master's programs are a great path to a credential, and in some cases, like a master's in computer science or a master's in civil engineering, can be important to get the kinds of work that you want to get in those particular fields. Here, discussions with alumni from Barnard who've pursued these programs can be really useful as well. We'll talk about some of this on Thursday with our alumni panel, where some of our folks are actually thinking about graduate school right now. Master's programs are often great ways to shift your discipline as well, or to deepen your exposure within a particular discipline. At Barnard, we see all the time students pursuing interdisciplinary scholarship, and this is amazing at the undergraduate level. The thing about applying to PhD programs is often they require a deep level of subfield specificity and knowledge. And master's programs may be a good way to get extra additional exposure to an individual subfield or discipline if you don't have that kind of concentration and focus at the undergraduate level. In terms of geography, there are great master's programs around the entire country and indeed around the world. Some programs in Europe may be cheaper than those in the United States, for example. And so if you're thinking about geographic flexibility, if you want to get a new foothold in a new city, a master's program can be a good way to do that. Just keep in mind that the cost of programs may not vary with location, but the cost of living does vary widely. If you're doing a master's program in New York versus Chicago, there are big differences in the cost of living as you consider a graduate program. When it comes to master's programs, and this goes across fields, you should always ask about the jobs that alumni have. Really strong programs tend to be able to track where their alumni go after their program. You should ask about the kinds of support created that's there for all populations of students, regardless of your objectives after the program, whether you want to go into industry or nonprofits, or whether you want to continue into doctoral programs. You want to make it clear that you have specific career objectives in mind, and you want to know how specific STEM programs support students who are pursuing those career objectives. You want to know what kind of support there is in the career offices that are provided by master's programs. Keep in mind, you can always come back to Beyond Barnard. We're here for you no matter what. But you do want to know, like if you're investing in a different institution, what kind of local support is there provided, particularly in STEM fields, for students coming out of these master's programs. And of course, you want to also think about, I have engineering on here because I know a lot of students are interested in the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences across the street at Columbia. You want to think about what kinds of differences in salaries, what kinds of positions are available with a technical training in engineering that you may not have had total access to as a liberal arts undergraduate. What can I say in terms of what I've seen about the Barnard network? Well, for one thing, when it comes to master's programs, there is a very strong presence at Columbia University. There is no shortage of alumni advice when it comes to master's programs because Barnard students have pursued every kind of master's degree at Columbia that you can imagine. Don't make a decision about a master's program without first consulting with us to help you connect with alumni who may have done that very program. It's a really great asset that you should take advantage of as a student considering these fields. There are also tons of master's alumni generally, and especially a strong network in New York. Students tend to leave Barnard and go to NYU. They go to Fordham. They go to Johns Hopkins. St. John's. They go to all sorts of different institutions right here in New York. The New School for Social Research has tons of master's programs. Parsons, which has a great sustainability and design program that's great for STEM students. There really is a strong network in New York across a broad range of disciplines, and it is absolutely something you should be doing to connect to alumni who've attended programs at any of these institutions. And remember, Beyond Barnard can help with applying to institutions and connecting to alumni who've gone to these programs. Other factors to think about when it comes to considering master's programs is that they're a great way to expand your network and your kind of intellectual family. Barnard is, on balance, a small community, a tight-knit community, a supportive community. And some students tend to like to go out to a big master's program and explore many different connections and establish new kind of interdisciplinary relationships with faculty and students in a big cohort. Master's programs tend to be a little on the large side. They're a great way to return to school after work. So master's programs can help you really discern whether you want to go into additional advanced study after a couple of years in the workplace. There's an efficiency and a seriousness and an incentive of a credential for master's programs. They tend to be intensive and meaningful experiences for those that are able to throw themselves at those experiences. They also, it's a degree that you can pursue while you're working as well. I put sugar high here because master's programs, if they are, if they're strong programs and you're happy in them, they can produce a kind of immediate enjoyment in getting a lot of academic exposure in a very short amount of time. In other words, they can be a clarifying set of years, sometimes as short as 9 months or 1 year. And you should keep in mind, though, that the price of that 1 year can be high in terms of dollars, in terms of how it pays off for your professional experience and potential further graduate trajectory. It might be the perfect thing. Okay, let's talk about PhDs, which I know that many of you said you're interested in most. Typical life of a PhD student in STEM fields is 5 to 6 years. That's about 2 years of coursework, followed by 3 years of lab intensive research, moderated, mentored by a primary investigator, a PI, and then culminating in a doctoral dissertation or a thesis, which is essentially the culmination of your subfield focused research. PhDs in the sciences can be much shorter than those in social sciences and humanities, but after PhDs, individuals who are thinking about jobs in the tenure track faculty market or in academia generally tend to do at least one postdoc. This is increasingly common. It can last from 1 to 4 to 5 years. It's just something to think about. Postdocs are ways to continue your research in the context of a new research lab. Certain kinds of PhDs, certainly PhDs in psychology, even PsyDs, which are a different form of graduate degree in psychology, may entail clinical work or kind of practical training with patients before proceeding to graduation. These can add years, but it's also typical. It's not out of the ordinary for clinical work to be built into the curriculum of these programs. In terms of funding and money, top programs will typically provide multiple years of funding. Top programs typically around 5. That might vary institution to institution, but essentially you are paid to do research and you may be paid to teach, to serve as a graduate TA at the institution. So questions about how programs are funded, you should always address during the application process and understand how graduate work at the PhD level is funded at the institutions in which you're interested. There are complex calculations when it comes to thinking about the opportunity costs of going to a PhD. So for example, in your 20s, you may not make a ton of money because you're just getting started in your career. The opportunity cost of going to a PhD is 6 years of wages. That can be very high for disciplines like computer science, where right out of college, you might be making a lot of money. It can be lower for other fields. And you should just think about this in concert with conversations with alumni, with Beyond Barnard, with your faculty, with your family. Make sure that you're cultivating a community of support and thinking about these calculations. Also, in terms of PhDs, there are tons of external fellowships for students in the sciences that you should also think about applying to through our office. The National Science Foundation, Ford Foundation, the Goldwater. There's tons of fellowships that are open to STEM students that may help fund either your research right now as an undergraduate or your research as a STEM doctoral student. This is especially important. You are women in sciences. women are underrepresented across most scientific fields, and there is funding for women. There is funding for traditionally minoritized or underrepresented minority groups. And so it's important to talk to our fellowship advisor, Jen Leck, who is fantastic about navigating these. You should absolutely always explore fellowships to help fund your doctoral education. In terms of your research partnerships, your key relationship will be with your primary investigator, your PI, your advisor. The PhD is a multi-year relationship with this primary investigator and that person's lab. So you should pick programs based on the strength of the lab, the cohort, and the work of the PI itself, PI, him or herself. Instead of kind of broad mastery that you might experience at a master's program, you're really thinking about specific subfield mastery. When you're thinking about a PhD program too, you want to think about the makeup of the faculty. Are there women on faculty? Are there individuals from minoritized backgrounds? Are there people of color on faculty? You're going to be spending a lot of time in these programs. And if you have a sense that the department is supportive of people of all backgrounds, that tends to produce better science. You know this just from your work at Barnard. So it's important to ask questions about the culture, the community, the kinds of people that are involved in the department. In terms of research, PhDs tend to privilege publication, poster presentation, and teaching as well. Teaching primarily as a means to help support your work, but also you're developing yourself as a teacher, as a mentor. If you're oriented towards an academic career, this can be really important for obvious reasons. If you're oriented towards an industry career, teaching experience can still be important as communications, as a training platform for communicating about the sciences to broad audiences. In terms of geographic flexibility, there are just fewer PhD programs than there are master's programs in total in STEM fields. You may have less flexibility about where to go if you want to get into a top program in your field. This should not make you panicked right now. It is not necessarily a deal breaker, but it's something you should be thinking about. Geography matters to people in varying degrees. I love Virginia. I spent my undergraduate years at the University of Virginia. I'd spend years and years there. I equally love New York and would do a doctoral here. I personally would probably not go to, I don't even want to name a state. I don't want to offend anybody, but there are a couple of states that would be really important to me not to go to for 6 or 7 years, and that would be important to me. It's important for you to think about what are your deal breakers? What are the places you may not want to go? I want to lay these last 3 out so we can keep moving too. When you're thinking about PhDs in STEM, it is really important to understand the program's openness to many different career paths. So this means asking tough questions when you are admitted, especially about where alumni are going. Are they getting academic jobs? If they want to go into industry, are they supported in their pursuit of other kinds of industry jobs? You need to try to figure out if it's possible to know what alumni are doing, either through your own research on LinkedIn or through your conversations with faculty. You also want to know about the kinds of postdocs that people are getting into. These are all considerations that seem far away. They seem 6 and 7 years down the line, but preparing yourself with this information now is important. I have loads to say about the Barnard network with respect to PhDs. And the great news is there are PhDs across all sorts of disciplines and all sorts of top programs. So again, please, please, please let us know if you need help connecting with PhDs, current PhDs, PhDs from recent years, PhDs from long ago. These are great resources for you to tap into. I think there's a sense sometimes that networking is for non-academic professions, but really some of the best insights you can get about being a scientist at the graduate level and beyond can come from your capacity to build community and conversation with Barnard folks. The last thing in terms of just like kind of your happiness, the wild cards here, do you really love self-directed research? Are you in STEM because you love being at the bench? You love finding new discoveries. You love producing work that's shared in terms of in conferences, in publications. That is really what you should be aiming at. If you want to go into doctoral work, you can do many things, right? But you shouldn't think a doctorate is a means to an end. I think the most productive way to think about whether you want to do a doctorate in the sciences is, do you want to conduct research for 6 more years in an intensively focused, individually mentored way? The last thing here is I think there's a lot of pessimism about doctoral work in the sciences, and it's disguised as I'm just going to give you the real talk. If you want to go into a PhD in the sciences, you should pursue that ambition if it is deep within what you want to do intellectually. Don't let anybody keep you from saying that you want to do this work. Instead, make sure that you're cultivating advice from multiple sources, getting inputs of valuable and diverse advice before you make a decision. Just laying out 4 quick things about professional degrees in STEM work. We talked about some of this right at the top of the conversation. These are kind of 4 soundbitey things that I want you to kind of go out into the world and think about after the conversation today, and I'm happy to talk more about them as well. The first is if you have a passion for the medical sciences or thinking about how your biology work can bring relief to patients, if you're thinking about how your chemistry background can help you bring drugs to market, if you're thinking about the ways that your psychology background might help you make a difference in the lives of patients, being a doctor is only one way to engage in health professions and use your STEM work to make change in the world. There's too much of a fixation on the MD or the MD PhD. And if these are ambitions that you have and you're passionate about pursuing them, fantastic. We're here to help you, and Dr. Amanda Dye on our team is great. But there's also other ways to pursue your passions with respect to the health professions. Nursing, physician's assistant, PsyDs, clinical psychology PhDs. There's lots of different ways to help make difference in the lives of patients. And so broaden your thinking about what it would mean to practice a medical profession. The second on law, I get this one all the time. I ask this one all the time. Some of you may have heard me ask it before, is would you still want to go to law school if it was called lawyer school? A lot of what I hear sometimes from Barnard students and alumni alike is, I want to go to law school, but I'm not sure that I want to be a lawyer. Going to law school is about training in a very specific way to be a lawyer. And even if you don't want to be a lawyer in the long term, I totally understand that. You need to want to go to law school for 3 years and study the law from the perspective of being a lawyer. And I'm happy to talk more about that. There's also, we just did a great series on thinking about law school. There's a whole new CourseWorks resource that I'm happy to share with those of you who would like on considering law school. But just, like I said, a question to ask yourself. Are you passionate about STEM? Are you passionate about the law? Are you passionate about being a lawyer in a STEM context, and vice versa? The average age of business school is 26 to 27. Experience is good. If you're unsure about whether you want to go to business school, that's totally okay. In fact, if you're unsure about going to any kind of graduate school, that's totally okay. Taking time, getting experience, and clarifying your professional goals can be not just instrumental in getting you into graduate school, it can actually make you a better graduate student. If you have time doing something other than school, getting experience, building a life for yourself, navigating rent in a new city, making a new network, building your own independent projects, these kinds of experiences can make you a better scientist at the bench, directing your own work. It can make you a better mentee because you know what you want more clearly out of a boss and a mentor. It can make you a better collaborator because you've worked on different kinds of projects. It's not necessary that you proceed directly to graduate school in any of these fields, but particularly in business school, directly after college if you're not ready. If you are ready, that's a totally different thing, and we support you in that decision. But don't panic. Don't be anxious if you can help it about needing to go to business school immediately. And the last, I'm so glad we got a chance to talk about this at the top of the conversation here, but public health and policy degrees are absolutely open to STEM students. This is a growing field. There is a need for individuals with really savvy tech, scientific, biological, psychological, neuroscience, chemistry, environmental backgrounds before heading into policy school. And this is a really popular path for Barnard students right now for some of the reasons that we already mentioned. And again, we're happy to talk about all of these things individually. Okay, but the big thing is, I'm gonna make this dance a few times, graduate school will be there when you are ready for it. Graduate school has been around for literally 1,000 years. It will survive COVID. It will be here after all of us. It will be here when the robot apocalypse comes. You should go to graduate school if you are ready. and you have clear goals and you know that you want to conduct research at that level. But for any other reason, if you're hesitant, if you're really unsure, if you think, I'm unsure now, but I'm sure I'll be sure once I'm there, stop and reflect on your goals again, and let's think about the conversations that we've had today. I love these two slides just because I love featuring amazing alumni. These are two stories that I found. So Caitlin Kratner, I love it that she says, when I went to college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do at all. She got an internship at the American Museum of Natural History, and that's how she decided she wanted to be a research scientist. And she's now at the University of Arizona as a professor in astronomy. These paths are not linear. You don't have to do thing A to thing B to thing C to thing D, and then boom, you're a professor. Paths in graduate school in STEM fields can be meandering. They can be winding. They can be unexpected. I also love Dara Richardson-Heron, who's going to be hopefully one of our speakers for a Beyond Barnard event in the next couple of weeks. But what I love about her quote here, she's talking about empathy, about the emotional attachment to patients. In addition to STEM technical knowledge, I think developing an appreciation for the importance of research at the graduate level means deepening your understanding about how scientific research can have meaning both in the academy and outside of it. So she's wonderful, and she's a doctor in a pharmaceutical setting. And so again, this notion that if you're a doctor, you're just going to be a practicing physician and that's your life, I think is really troubled in a productive way if you start to connect with alumni and think about how their biographies have led them to really surprising places. Everybody okay? Can I get a thumbs up? I know we're running a little slow because of those discussion groups. I see a couple of thumbs up. That's good. Okay, good, you're still with me. I couldn't find, I'm so sorry, you know, like I get it, it's Barnard. This dog is so cute, and I know I have a PhD in good boy, but I just couldn't resist. Look at this face. I mean, come on, it's the best. Okay, how do you decide? I want to lay out a few differences here, and you can come back to the presentation and just think about this. But I think that when I talk to Barnard students and alumni, very often they think about graduate school in the same way that they think about how they applied to college. And the truth is that the way that you pick a graduate program is really substantively different, no matter what discipline you're intending on, no matter what degree program or type you're intending on from your college experience. So when you're applying to college, you might think about an institution's culture, its rankings, and its reputation. But in graduate school, you're really going to think about the program's culture, the program's reputation, the faculty's reputation, and what their focus is. A school that is 150,000 on the US News and World Report rankings list might have the #1 field in the subfield of insect biology that you're interested in. The way you get that information is by talking to faculty at Barnard in your field, your other mentors at other research, in other research engagements that you might have. But it can be very true that an institution that you never might have thought about applying to at the undergraduate level has the very best program in the graduate work that you're most interested in. So you're thinking about program instead of institution. When you're applying to liberal arts colleges, you might think of the quality of instruction and then of research. And I think at Barnard, it's unique because, of course, the faculty are great teachers and researchers because they're associated with Columbia as well. At the graduate level, you want to think about the quality of research first and advising, potentially even more than instruction. You want to pick a mentor who's going to be able to mentor you effectively, right? And that's a different kind of research. At the undergraduate level, you might think of the diversity of academic and co-curricular options, whereas at graduate school, you might think about the depth of options within your field of study. So thinking more in terms of depth as opposed to breadth. At the liberal arts level, you might think there's a lifelong affinity and connection. Certainly that's the case at Barnard. People identify with Barnard for the rest of their life. At graduate school, there's sometimes, depending on the programs, there might be a kind of instrumental means to or an instrumental end to the program that you're pursuing. You might not have a lifelong association with that institution, but certainly it's the hope. I love UChicago. That's where I got my master's degree. I'll always be loyal to that institution. But it doesn't always happen, and that's okay. At the liberal arts college level, there's many options for changing your mind. I'm sure some of you have changed your mind about your major 150 times already. At graduate school, there are delimited options to change direction. So for example, when you apply with a personal statement, no one will ever hold you to precisely that research agenda once you're in graduate school. Too many things can change. However, once you're in a PhD in chemistry, it is exceptionally hard to transfer into a PhD in English. So again, it's not impossible, but your options are much more delimited. And again, I think that's why it's important to have a clear, personal, reflected reason about why you're committing to a particular program. And at the college level, you're thinking about tailored supportive resources, tons of administrative support. Certainly there's 16 people at Beyond Barnard here to help, your faculty advisors, your class deans, the Athena Center, the Well Women. I can't even get to close to the end of the list of resources that are at Barnard to help. Graduate school, you want to think about how you're going to be more independent. They're more generalized resources. And navigating institutional structures at the graduate level can be, in general, this is not true at every institution, kind of more variegated and broader. I'm going to skip this slide just in the interest of time, but don't restrict yourself to only one source of advice when it comes to navigating some of these considerations, right? Build a community of support around yourself to assess graduate schools and programs the same way that you would assess career options for sure. Okay, and the very last 2 slides here. And again, these are differences between undergraduate and graduate as well. So we talked about best practices and CVs yesterday. So for most graduate programs, a CV is going to be appropriate. For things like law school and business school, we might do a resume instead, but always consult with us and we're happy to walk you through. And again, for those of you who didn't have a chance to join us yesterday, we walked through some best practices on CV creation for STEM students that we're happy to reproduce. You'll see the video when it's out. You can always do it in advising. One thing I definitely want to underscore, though, is that for science graduate students at the PhD level, the statement of purpose or the statement of research intent is typically the most important document in your application. You'll be asked to submit a representative sample of your work. You'll be asked to do standardized tests. Those can vary in terms of their importance. For some fields, standardized tests are very important. For others, they are very much less important compared to other elements of your application. But almost no matter what, your statement of purpose will be the most important document that you put together. I have seen also very often, more often these days, the diversity statement and interviews are a more common element of applications. I think this is really great news. It means that institutions are thinking more holistically about candidates. They're asking about how to create a culture of inclusivity and equity in STEM fields, which is a conversation that is obviously well overdue. And it means that the diversity statement and interviews have become a great place for you to articulate the whole self that you're bringing to a STEM program. And I think this is especially the case the kind of professional schools were early adopters of this kind of process, but really the doctoral programs and even some master's programs are catching up. I think this is great news. I promised that I would give you a timeline, and I hope that this doesn't overwhelm you at all, but even right now, if you're thinking about applying to a doctoral program in the fall, I think you can do it. I don't think you have to wait if you don't want to. I think we can pull it off. Ideally, you're going to have a year-long timeline where you can do a process of reflection and enter into the application process with a little bit more leeway. But this is basically an outline of the overall process. So Hannah, just to clarify, diversity statement, I should have been a little bit more specific. Diversity statement will typically ask, how does your experience of diversity, equity, and inclusion how do you think about your experience of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how do you contribute to a diverse intellectual environment in a university setting? It might ask you questions like, what does equity mean to you? It might ask, are there factors about your own identity that you would be comfortable sharing and that you think would make a substantive difference in the intellectual culture of our program? There are lots of different iterations, but essentially it asks you specifically to identify how your commitments, your experiences, your life experiences, your biography, your intellectual work has been informed by, inflected by, and is at the heart of who you are as a scientist and as a scholar. And I think that programs have begun to ask more pointed questions about individual commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion because they realize that diversity is better for scholarship. So I hope that answers your question a little bit. They come in all shapes and sizes, and we're always happy to help advise you on creating those documents. Okay, so we're about 4 minutes late. If you gotta go, you can totally go. But I always like to make sure that there's time for questions. These are my kind of, in the next 6 weeks, you should figure out how to reflect on your goals, conduct some outreach to alumni, and we'll start that process on Thursday with our conversation with some amazing alums. I'm super excited. And then, meet with Beyond Barnard. I think the sooner the better. I think waiting until you have a deadline is really rough. Schedule now. We're all here. We're all virtual. We're all losing our voices. I feel like Dr. Anthony Fauci, who actually, I don't mean to brag, but went to my high school. So I'm feeling a little hoarse, but we're all excited and delighted to be able to take this time this summer to continue to mentor and advise you all virtually. It's helped us all stay in touch, and we're excited to do it. So if you have questions, feel free to shout them out. And again, you can put them directly in the chat. Hope this has been helpful. If you're gonna jet, I just wanna say really quickly, thank you again for coming this afternoon. I hope that you'll join us for other events this week and across the remainder of this summer. Stay safe, stay well, and I'll stop there. And if you guys have questions, I can stick around for sure. Thanks so much, everybody.